All right, Microvellum University is now back in session. So when or why would you need to use more than one spec group? And what exactly are spec groups and what are they doing inside of Toolbox? Well, that's what we're going to be learning in this next video. We're going to create a scenario where it would make more sense for us to use two spec groups in our project to control the settings for cabinets that will be installed in different areas, rather than just making the changes that we need inside of each cabinet. Along with that, we're going to learn how to save spec groups with its unique components to the library, so if we want, we can use it again on another project down the road. Okay, so now let's go ahead and open up Toolbox and get to know a little bit more about spec groups. So I've created a new project here called MVU Spec Groups and started off by placing a few cabinets on this wall. So go ahead and spend a little time to do this on your own. Give you a quick little preview of what we got going on. So it's all our standard or default settings from our template. And then our elevation, upper cabinet height, standard base cabinet height with 1.5 inch countertop. So we're at 34.5 on our base cabinets, 84 to our tall cabinet. And you can see here that we have 5 separate products coming in from the library. Now that you have these cabinets drawn in, let's go through the steps on using a different spec group to make some of these changes. So let's first start off by going into our Toolbox setup and project spec groups. Now we're going to right click on this specification group and copy that. Now you're going to want to give each component a unique name along with the spec group. We'll start off with this one. Why don't we call this one group 2? Make sure you check all the boxes to create new components that will be used for this spec group. And actually, we don't need a door wizard file. We can uncheck that one. I'm not going to make any changes to our door wizard. With that parentheses 2, it makes it a unique name. So we could just leave that for each one of these components. Now we have our group 2 with its unique components. Now, because they were just copied components from this spec group, all the values are going to be the same. So we'll have to go through each one of those and make some changes. Before we do that, let's rename our first spec group to group 1. Now going into the project wizard of group 2 spec group, here we can make some changes to the default sizes. We'll make this run ADA. So let's go 32.5. I can just hit tab and cycle through the rest of these. Tall cabinet height, let's change that to 90. Depth at 25. Upper cabinet height at 36 and upper cabinet depth at 16. If we wanted any additional construction, maybe on this run of cabinets, we'll use a notched toe kick. Render finishing options. We're also going to change the finish on this one. So group 1 will be a PL1 color. Group 2 will be PL2. Finish label 1 is already called out as PL1, so that was coming in from the original spec group. We're now going to be using finish label 2. We look to this prompt, finish 2, for the finish label option on our elevation drawing. In this specification group, finish label 1 is no longer being used. If there were anything that we needed to change inside of the globals, we could do that. But for now, we'll just move on to our cut parts. So let's open up our cut parts component. Let's go ahead and right click to show groups. And we can see here that our base, tall, and upper carcass parts are all using that white melamine. Create a new project level material. Remember, if we don't know where it is in the folder, we can just select it, right click, and find that selected material, and it'll open up the folder where it's living. Here we have our white melamine 2-sided. I'm just going to copy this by right clicking and copy that selection to our project level folder. And in here, we can now make these changes to edit the name. So I'm just going to call this black melamine. Now, as we process these products for production on our reports, the shop will see that we have some white melamine parts and black melamine parts. Before we move on, make sure that we assign the black melamine to our base, tall, and upper carcass parts. Now we got to do the same thing to our edge banded parts. I guess I could have just stayed in that previous window and selected edge band parts, but whatever. Let's go back in there, find that edge banding, copy it to the project level folder, make those edits, and assign it to the correct material pointer names. Now we still have to do a little bit more work in that material file. I wanted us to first just focus on updating the carcass parts, making sure that was all updated. Then we'll go back in and work on our finished faces. So what was a PL1, we're now going to change to PL2. So let's go through the process and I'll show you how we can do that. So again, selecting on my group 2 spec group, opening up the cut parts file and showing groups just so we can see here that we have the PL1 being used still for these finished faces on the base, tall, and uppers. What we could do is create another project level material, but I wanted to show you another way we can do that. And that's by going in, finding the selected material, going into that folder. So we're using PL Solid for group 2, right? Now, because these are different components, the changes that we make here are only going to affect this group 2 spec group. So I can select this folder, right click, and find and replace description just inside of this category. So just inside our PL1 solid folder, I can find PL1 and replace it with PL2. Because it is case sensitive, so just make sure that you have that spelled correctly so it finds the right text. Now that's been updated, and over in our current material, it's automatically changed everything here to a PL2. We're not worried about this folder. That's coming in from the template. We're just making sure everything inside of this category has been updated with PL2. That takes care of our cabinet size defaults, also the material and edge banding. Let's make one other change inside of the hardware wizard. So we can have different poles being used on this set cabinets compared to the group 1, compared to what's being used on group 1. So instead of a handle rod, we're just going to change this to a standard wire pull. The idea here is just to see the difference. Doesn't matter if it's the pole that we really want to use or not, just that it's something different than what we currently have on group 1. We won't change anything on the drawers, but let's go ahead and select lock all doors. So now we have a new spec group created with new project level settings, and it's just a matter of drawing some more cabinets and then assigning those cabinets to this new spec group. Now, because this customer wants the same configuration with uppers, tall, and a couple base cabinets, first thing I'll do is copy our walls, selecting that base point, making sure our polar tracking is on, and now copying the products. Now, because these products have an item number, we can use a window to select each one of these. Now we got our second run of cabinets here. I'm going to go and renumber them also just to make it easier as we go back into our product list to make sure everything's assigned to the correct spec group. So under modify, modify products, renumber these products starting at 201. Now, like we've seen before, going into the prompts, we can take a look at the spec group that's being used and we can change it through here, but that would require 5 separate steps of doing that. So let's just go into our product list and make this change a little bit easier. So 201, 202, down to 205. You can see there's our spec group, just having them all highlighted, right-clicking, edit product list, and changing the specification group. So those are the different spec groups that we have for this project. Select group 2, hit OK. Now, a little trick that I want to show you inside of here, we're going to talk more about this as we get into creating work orders for our projects, but just something you can do here once we've assigned a new spec group. Some of those settings that we have in that group aren't showing up in this list. Remember, we had our new heights and depths for our uppers and also for our tall. So we can right click again over to edit product list. And on the bottom here, we have rebuild product list. You'll get a little notification of what this is doing. So it's just pulling in some of those new values that we had set up in our project wizard and global variables. Now, obviously, if we went back into the drawing and redrew these cabinets, everything would update with those new project level settings. Then we would go back into our product list and we would see that. But if you stayed in the list before redrawing, you can just rebuild that product list this way. And now just to see the changes inside of model space, I'm going to redraw our selected cabinets. And once we finish this, we'll go into the product just to verify that we have the correct material assigned. So you'll notice first off, just by looking at the colors, they've changed based off of our rendered finishes. So these are the layers inside of AutoCAD. When we have a finish label 1, you'll see here that's the layer 3D finish 1. Here we have a finish label 2 or rendering finish 2, and the layer is also changed. That's all set up in Toolbox to look to those different rendered finishes and assign the correct layer. Now, as I change my visual style, you can see some of those other changes that we made inside of this new spec group. So those are the locks that we turned on, also the new handles, different than our group 1 spec group. And then the finish label options, also updated with the new rendered finishes. So group 1 using the PL1 and group 2, PL2. Now I'm just going to go through part properties to take a look at our upper cabinet. Just want to verify our carcass material. There's our carcass part. black melamine. Just cycle through, double check to make sure. There we have an upper bottom that is finished, so it's using our PL2. And just to double check that the door is also using the same finish, there we go, PL2. Another way to see all that material is going through Edit Design Data. We'll pick on our tall cabinet this time. Now, because I selected that subassembly, it's opening up this workbook, but just close that just into the local workbook, select our Cut Parts tab, and there's the material being used for these parts. You can see our new edge banding also being used there. So if there was a specification group that you had set up and it was something that could be used on a future project, you would want to make sure first off that these are unique names. So the project wizard, be sure that that is named something different than what is currently in your template. So this parentheses 2 would be fine. You have the option to save the entire spec group to the template, and that would include all these components, or you can just save a component. But first, let me show you how we can save this one. Pretty simple. That's been saved. And just for example, let's make a new project wizard component, give that a unique name, and save just the component to the template. Now we'll close that, go into our library specification groups. And you can see here, group 2 is now a spec group that can be used for future projects. And there's a new component. If I wanted to assign that, instead of using project wizard 2, we can use that component. Now, because I don't want this one in my template, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. Be sure that you're not deleting a spec group that you do want to save in here. So once we've deleted that spec group, you'll notice that the components that were used for that spec group have also been deleted, but we still have this one more remaining. So I want to also get rid of that guy. Okay, well, that's how using more than one specification group inside of your project can help you be a little bit more efficient in your workflow. Now, just remember when you're making changes to these spec groups inside of your template that you're 100% sure what you're doing is correct. Now, in my opinion, you might want to have just one person inside of your company that's doing these changes or managing that library data. And of course, always create that backup. Thanks again for watching, and I'll meet you back here for our next one.